The engagement party is tomorrow. Leo and I are going bungee jumping. I thought I'd heard her wrong. What did you say? Isabella Vance slid her phone into her pocket, her tone breezy. A final goodbye to being single. We'll go in the morning, be back in the afternoon. If we run late, we'll just push the party to the evening. Esther de here. With him, Leo Martinez stood behind her, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, a faint smile on his face as he looked down. Don't get the wrong idea, Mr. Hayes. I'm just escorting her. You don't need to go, she said, looking at me. Someone has to oversee the arrangements at the hotel. It's better if you stay here. In that single moment, everything became clear. I wasn't her fiancé. I was the event coordinator. And you think this is appropriate? I asked. She frowned. Don't be so possessive, Ethan. It's just bungee jumping. She turned and walked away, the white fabric of the prototype gown gleaming under the lights. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching her get into the car with her assistant. My phone buzzed. A voice message from her. Don't be difficult. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned and dialed my assistant. Cancel the engagement party. And freeze all partnerships with the Vance Corporation. 01 the day before the engagement party. I was in the hotel ballroom, supervising the final arrangements. I had personally chosen the venue, the best ballroom in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling. During the light check, the spots illuminated the backdrop where my name and Isabella's were intertwined in brilliant gold foil. The sole heir to the Hayes family, engaged to the woman at the helm of the Vance Corporation. Everyone called it a merger of titans. The door swung open while I was still confirming details with the event planner. Isabella strode in on sharp stilettos, her presence as commanding as ever. As the CEO of Vance Corp., a position she'd inherited 3 years ago, she had a reputation for being a force of nature. Leo Martinez followed her, her executive assistant, a high-level hire who had appeared at Vance Corp 6 months ago. Ivy League, a flawless resume, and a calm, measured way of speaking. He was an expert at delivering the final, cutting remark in her meetings. I'd seen him many times. He always stood a half step behind her, like a shadow. Isabella glanced at the backdrop and smiled. Ethan, I have an idea. Her tone was casual, as if she were deciding on dinner. Leo and I are going to Vegas tomorrow to go bungee jumping. I was sure I had misheard. What? Her smile didn't falter. A last hurrah. I won't be this free after we're engaged. Just seizing the final day to cut loose. Leo stood beside her, not saying a word, just glancing at his phone with the ghost of a smile on his lips. I locked my eyes on her. The engagement party is tomorrow. I know. She threw up her hands. We'll go in the morning and be back by afternoon. If we're running late, we can just move the party to the evening. She said it as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You don't need to come, she added. Someone has to manage things at the hotel. You're more useful here. In that instant, I understood. In her world, my job was to hold down the fort while she lived her life. I was silent for a few seconds. You're sure you want to take him? I looked at Leo. He finally looked up, his tone polite. Mr. Hayes, this was a last-minute idea of Isabella's. I'm just accompanying her. Isabella's brow furrowed. Don't look at him like that. It was my idea. I asked her, the day before our engagement party, you're going bungee jumping with another man. Does that seem appropriate to you? Her expression hardened. Ethan, don't be so sensitive. I just want to do something for myself. Don't you trust me? The question came out fast. I looked at her. 3 years ago, when I had just taken over a part of the Hayes family business, she had just returned from overseas. We met at a gala. She'd had too much to drink and had the nerve to announce to a room full of people that the Hayes heir was nothing special. Later, during our first joint project, she pulled 3 all-nighters and cried over spreadsheets in the conference room. Back then, her eyes held ambition, but also sincerity. I love that about her, that sharp edge. But now, I was suddenly realizing that edge was never turned on anyone else. It was always reserved for me. It's not that I don't trust you. I just don't understand. Her patience wore thin. What's not to understand? It's one bungee jump. Are you serious? Finished. She turned to Leo. Let's go. We have a flight to catch. She was wearing the prototype of the custom gown I'd had made for her. Pure white, with a perfectly tailored waist. It was meant for tomorrow night's rehearsal. Now, she was wearing it to go bungee jumping. I stood at the window and watched them leave the hotel. Leo held the car door for her, his hand hovering protectively over the roof of the car, a gesture so natural it seemed rehearsed. The car pulled away and vanished. My phone buzzed. A voice message from Isabella. "Don't throw a fit. I'll be back soon." There was no apology in her tone, only condescension, like she was calming a pouting child. I didn't answer. The ballroom was silent. The planning team exchanged uneasy glances. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and called my assistant. "Cancel the engagement party." There was a stunned second of silence on the other end. "Sir, what about the guests for tomorrow?" "Notify every single one. Pay the cancellation fees in full." My voice was flat. "Also, put a hold on the review process for all joint projects with Advance Corporation. The loan guarantees, the channel licensing, the joint investments, audit every last one. From this moment on, we are not allocating any more resources." My assistant's breathing hitched. "Understood." I hung up. I stared at the two names side by side on the backdrop. It was almost laughable. Vance Corp's rise over the past 3 years wasn't just due to her decisions. The Hayes family had provided 3 emergency capital infusions and 2 major distribution concessions. Every single time, I had personally made the calls to negotiate the terms for her. She told the world it was her strategic vision. I never corrected her. Looking back now, I had clearly given far too much. That evening, my phone lit up. A notification from Instagram. Leo Martinez. I tapped it open. The photo was taken on a high-altitude bungee platform. Isabella, still in that white gown, her hair whipping in the wind, had her face pressed against Leo's shoulder. They were in mid-air, having just leaped from the platform. The photo captured them suspended between sky and canyon. She was laughing with wild abandon, her arms wrapped tightly around him. The caption was a single word: freedom. In the comments, people were cheering them on, offering congratulations. No one knew tomorrow was supposed to be her engagement party. I stared at the picture. My mind was quiet. The anger was long gone. All that was left was ice. I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the table. The ballroom lights were still on as the crew began dismantling the floral arrangements. The backdrop was slowly being taken down. The moment they removed the panel with our gold foil names, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. She had no idea. What she'd jumped from wasn't just a cliff. It was the last thread of connection between us. 02, by the time the hotel ballroom was half cleared, I was back at the office. Hayes Corp headquarters was in the financial district, a glass monolith that glittered like a cold, digital screen against the night sky. My assistant, Mark, followed me, a folder tucked under his arm. "Sir, the cancellation notices have all been sent. The hotel's penalty fee will be wired in the morning." I nodded. "Are legal and finance here?" "Waiting for you in the conference room." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. The man in the reflection was calm, his face devoid of emotion. 3 people were waiting in the conference room. Our head of legal, Mr. Peterson, a man in his 40s who did everything by the book. Our CFO, Sarah Jenkins, whose sensitivity to data was uncanny, and the head of our investment division. A thick stack of contracts was already spread across the table. "I want a complete breakdown of our partnership with Vance Corp," I said, taking a seat. "Categorized by project." Peterson pushed a file toward me. "We currently have 7 active collaborations, 2 joint real estate developments, 3 distribution licensing agreements, 1 short-term liquidity support loan, and 1 bank credit guarantee." I flipped through the contracts. I knew the terms by heart. 3 years ago, when the Vance Corp's capital chain was strained, I was the one who negotiated their line of credit with the bank. The day I co-signed the guarantee, Isabella had stood beside me, smiling brilliantly. Thinking back, she probably just saw it as something she was owed. "Does the guarantee have an early termination clause?" Peterson adjusted his glasses. "It does. In the event of significant credit risk or operational abnormalities on their part, we can unilaterally withdraw." "Operational abnormalities?" I looked up. Sarah Jenkins spoke. "Vance Corp expanded too quickly last year. Their debt-to-asset ratio is already above the industry average. Last quarter's profits declined, and their cash flow is not strong." I closed the contract, formalized that risk assessment report, sent it to the partner bank first thing in the morning. "Suspend all distribution licenses." The investment head hesitated. "Sir, suspending them will impact our own business as well." "In the short term, yes," I said, looking at him. But not in the long term. The room fell silent. I continued. On the joint real estate projects, we're pulling our funding. Sarah looked up. Divesting will require a board resolution. Then get one. My tone was quiet but firm. As of today, Hayes Corp will no longer provide any resource allocation to Vance Corporation, Peterson asked in a low voice. Do we need to provide a public reason? A strategic realignment. For words. It was enough. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Every clause was dissected, reevaluated, and acted upon. One call after another was made. The bank executive started with pleasantries, but his tone turned serious the moment I mentioned pulling the guarantee. Ethan, is the situation that critical? Risk management, I said. He was silent for a few seconds. Understood. We'll reassess their credit line. After hanging up, I had Mark contact our distributors. Hayes Corp's licensing contracts are on hold for renewal. Yes, sir. The office was brightly lit, the table piled high with documents. No one mentioned the engagement party. At 11 o'clock, Sarah came in with the latest numbers. If the bank tightens their lending, Vance Corp's cash flow can last a month at most. A month is enough. I stood up. Send all the documents out tomorrow morning. The meeting ended, and people filed out. Mark stayed behind. Sir, about Ms. Vance, do you think she'll come to you directly? She will. Will you see her? We'll see. I didn't elaborate. Back in my office, I opened my laptop and pulled up Vance Corp's financial statements from the past 2 years. Expansion, land acquisition, mergers with smaller companies. They had moved fast. The pace had accelerated after Leo Martinez joined. He was skilled at writing proposals and even better at persuasion. Isabella trusted him. She trusted him enough to let him lead important meetings. I remember a reception 6 months ago. Leo was in front of several investors, analyzing market trends, announcing that Vance Corp was about to enter a new sector. Isabella sat at the head of the table, listening intently. I had warned her then not to move too fast. Her response was, Leo understands this industry better than you do. I didn't say another word that day. Looking at it now, it wasn't that she lacked capability. She was just in too much of a hurry. My phone vibrated. The caller ID read, Mr. Vance, the chairman of Vance Corp and Isabella's father. I answered, Ethan, I heard you canceled the engagement party? His voice was tight with anger. I did. Why wasn't there a discussion first? It wasn't necessary. Silence on the other end. Why were the joint projects halted too? A decision made after a risk assessment. His voice softened. Ethan, our families have worked together for years. Pulling out so suddenly isn't good for anyone. Mr. Vance, business partnerships are built on terms and conditions. My voice was steady. The conditions changed. Naturally, the partnership has to be adjusted. His breathing grew heavy. Is this because of Isabella? I didn't answer. Young people have their little disagreements. We can talk it through, he said. There's no need to blow things up like this. This isn't a disagreement. I looked out at the night sky. It's a judgment. The line was quiet for a few seconds. Think this through. I already have. I hung up. The office was silent again. At 1 a.m., all the notification documents were sent. Banks, partners, project subsidiaries. The process was clean, with no loopholes. I sat in my chair, not leaning back. For 3 years, I had been accustomed to standing behind her, solving her problems. Now I was simply taking my resources back. Mark knocked. Sir, we just got word. The bank has already requested supplementary materials from Vance Corporation. Good. A few distributors are also taking a wait-and-see approach. As expected, Mark nodded, hesitating. Something else. No, sir. He backed out of the room. I put the contracts on my desk into a drawer. The light on the desktop was clean and cold. My phone was quiet. No new messages. She was probably still up in the air, where the wind was strong. The next morning, Sarah sent an update. The bank has formally initiated a risk review. I replied with a single word. Good. At 10, a representative from a distribution channel called. Mr. Hayes, we just need to confirm. Is the partnership with Vance Corp continuing? Proceed according to the contract. All new orders are on hold. The man's tone grew noticeably cautious. Understood. At 11, the head of investments knocked on my door. Vance Corp stock has started to slide. The market reacts quickly, I said. He nodded. Should we make another move? Not yet. The current pace was enough. I glanced at the time. 3 in the afternoon. She should be back for Vegas by now. I didn't call her. I didn't send any explanation. I just sat behind my desk, looking at the risk report in my hands. The data was laid out, clear and stark. This wasn't an impulse. It was a reckoning. While she was laughing in the sky, I was down here, settling the accounts one by one. 3 the morning was packed with back-to-back meetings, which I attended as usual. The marketing department reported on new project progress. The investment team presented potential acquisition targets, and legal handed me the signed receipts for the notices sent last night, one after another. Each stamped receipt felt like the fall of a gavel. I didn't dwell on them, just had Mark file them away. At noon, Sarah Jenkins came in. Sir, Vance Corp's primary bank just notified them that the guarantee withdrawal process is under review. They're demanding Vance provide additional collateral within 3 days. I nodded. And the distributors? 2 of them have already suspended their payment settlements. She reported it calmly, as if discussing the weather. How long can Vance Corp last? Depends on whether Mr. Vance is willing to sell assets, Sarah paused. They have 2 valuable land parcels. If they sell, it could buy them some time. Otherwise, their cash flow is going to be extremely tight. I didn't respond, just flipped my desk calendar to the afternoon. At 3:30, I had a standing internal meeting. At 4 o'clock, I was scheduled for a site inspection. The engagement party was supposed to be today, with a rehearsal at 3 and guests arriving at dusk. Now, my schedule was clear, like a page had been ripped out. I didn't feel a sense of loss, only clarity. At 2:40, Mark came in to remind me of my next meeting. Sir, the hotel called. They said someone from Ms. Vance's side contacted them asking about the party setup. What was their reply? As you instructed, they told them it was canceled, Mark said. Her person was shocked, kept asking why. The hotel manager told them to contact you directly. I grunted. Don't take their calls. Mark nodded and left. At 3:10, my phone vibrated. The caller ID, Isabella Vance. I looked at it for 2 seconds, then let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started again. I still didn't answer. The third time it rang, I silenced it and flipped it face down on my desk. In the conference room, the department heads were already assembled. I walked in, and everyone stood. Sit, I said, my eyes scanning the room. Today, we're discussing 2 things. First, resource allocation following the distribution channel adjustments. Second, project risk management. No one mentioned the engagement party. No one asked about the Vances. They all understood that the boss's personal life was off limits, but everyone could feel the change in rhythm at Hayes Corp, like a car that had suddenly accelerated. The meeting ended just after 4. As I walked back to my office, Mark intercepted me, looking uneasy. Sir, there's someone from Vance Corp downstairs. Who? Ms. Vance. He lowered his voice. And her assistant, Leo Martinez. I paused. They were faster than I expected. Let them up, I said. Send them to a guest conference room. Mark hesitated for a second. You're going to see them? Yes. I buttoned my suit jacket. Tell the front desk not to stop them. A few minutes later, the conference room door opened. Isabella walked in, her face still flushed with excitement, as if she'd just stepped out of a vacation. She had changed into a sharp trench coat, her hair pulled back, her makeup perfect. Not a trace of fatigue. Leo Martinez followed, still in his standard business attire, a file folder in his hand. Isabella spoke the moment she entered, her words rapid. Ethan Hayes, what is the meaning of this? She didn't sit, just stood across the table from me. I looked up at her, my voice even. You're back. My words seemed to sting her. Her eyes went cold. You canceled the engagement party? I nodded. Her breath caught. What gives you the right? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, my gaze shifted to Leo. You're here, too. Leo gave a slight nod, his tone excessively polite. Mr. Hayes, Isabella just got off the plane and was flooded with messages. Multiple partners have suddenly suspended contact. We're just trying to understand what's happening. He placed the file folder on the table, as if preparing to negotiate. Isabella cut him off with a raised hand, her eyes locked on me. The engagement party was a family matter. You cancel it with a single phone call? Are you trying to humiliate my family? A small, shallow smile touched my lips. When you took your male assistant bungee jumping, did you ever consider that I might be humiliated? Her face stiffened. That was an activity, a bachelorette party, that's all. Her voice rose. Do you have to be so petty? I leaned back in my chair, motionless. You pushed the party to the evening, told me not to come, and to stay at the hotel to supervise, I said. You had it all planned out so smoothly. Isabella gritted her teeth. You just don't trust me. I met her gaze. Trust doesn't mean unconditional compliance. Leo interjected, his tone gentle. Mr. Hayes, perhaps Isabella didn't consider your feelings, but what's done is done. The most important thing now is to solve the problem. About the joint projects, I looked at him. You're very concerned about the projects? Leo's expression didn't change. It's in the company's best interest. The company's interest? I repeated, my voice flat. You're her assistant, not a partner at Hayes Corporation. Isabella shot him a look, as if suddenly realizing he shouldn't have spoken. Leo immediately fell silent and took a half step back. The room was quiet for a few seconds. Isabella finally sat down, her posture rigid, her fingers digging into the armrest. Ethan, what do you want? She asked, her voice tight with suppressed anger. You're pulling funding, freezing distribution, withdrawing guarantees. Is this your revenge? I looked her in the eyes. This is a realignment. She gave a cold laugh. A realignment? You're driving the Vance Corporation into the ground, and you call it a realignment. I didn't look away. Do you really think your company's current situation was caused by me in a single day? Her eyes flickered. Who else could it be? The bank is suddenly demanding more collateral. Our partners won't take our calls. It's all because of you. I reached for the file folder on the table and opened it. Inside were copies of payment demands and partnership suspension notices, clearly gathered in a hurry on their way over. I put the documents back. These are business decisions, I said. You know exactly what your financial situation looks like, don't you? The color drained from her face. She wasn't ignorant. She had just grown accustomed to having the Hayes family as her safety net. Leo cleared his throat, his voice even softer. Mr. Hayes, Vance Corp is indeed in a period of expansion, but the situation is manageable. A sudden withdrawal like this will trigger a chain reaction. Whatever is between you and Isabella can be discussed privately. Don't drag both companies into it, Leo. I cut him off. He stopped. In what capacity are you speaking to me right now? I looked at him. As her assistant? Or as the future head of the Vance family? The air was sucked out of the room. Isabella's head snapped up, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. What are you talking about? Leo's Adam's apple bobbed. He struggled to maintain his composure. Mr. Hayes, you're mistaken. I didn't press the point, turning my attention back to Isabella. The party is canceled, and the partnerships are on hold, I said clearly. If you want a reason, I can give you one. She stared at me, defiant. Go on. My voice was quiet. I'm calling it off. She looked as if she'd been punched in the gut. She froze. Why do you have to call it off? Her voice trembled, a mix of fury and panic. Do you think you're the only one who get a say in this? Yesterday, you seemed to think you were the only one who got a say in a lot of things. I shot back. Her knuckles turned white. Ethan, don't forget, we've been together for 3 years. I haven't forgotten, I said, which is why I gave you so many chances. Isabella's chest rose and fell. She looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't know where to start. Suddenly, she stood, rounded the table, and came toward me. You're trying to make me beg, aren't you? She hissed, her voice low. You just want to watch me apologize, watch me plead with you. I looked up at her, unflinching. I don't. She froze. Then what do you want? I stood up, keeping an arm's length between us. I want you to leave. Isabella's eyes instantly welled up. She probably never imagined I would be this final. She thought I would yell, we would fight, and after all the drama, things would go back to her way. Leo, seeing the situation spiral, quickly stepped forward. Isabella, don't get emotional. Let's go back. And Isabella shoved him away with a sharp movement. Shut up. Her voice cracked. She immediately tried to compose herself, but the damage was done. The moment was humiliating. Leo stood frozen, his face pale. Isabella turned back to me, her voice thick. Are you really going to do this to my family? I looked at her. What you thought of me is now what I think of our partnership. Her lips parted, and finally, a more practical sentence came out. We can negotiate the divestment. The guarantee, the distribution, we can talk. Name your terms. I smiled. Now you want to talk terms. Her gaze started to drift. as if she was finally realizing that this was a problem her anger couldn't solve. I pressed the intercom on my desk. "Mark, please show our guests out." The moment I put the phone down, Isabella seemed to ignite, grabbing the edge of the table. "Ethan Hayes, you wouldn't dare." I looked at her white-knuckled grip. "You can keep shouting," my tone didn't change. "This is Hayes Corporation." Footsteps approached from outside. Mark opened the door and stood there, his expression carefully neutral. Isabella glared at me, tears shimmering in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door, her back to me. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. She walked out quickly, the hem of her trench coat swinging in a sharp, hurried arc. Before following her, Leo glanced back at me. In his eyes, there was suppressed anger and a hint of probing. I met his gaze. He looked away and hurried after Isabella. The door closed, and the room was quiet again. Mark asked softly, "Sir, should I have someone monitor Vance Corp's activities?" "Stick to the plan," I said. "What's coming will come." I returned to my desk and opened the next file. The paper was thin, but it felt heavy. Today was just the first time she had hit a wall. A much louder crash was still to come. 0 for the day. Isabella Vance walked out of Hayes Corp. The sky was heavy and gray. I expected her to cool off for a few days, then send someone to negotiate. The Vance family had always solved problems at the negotiating table. Even after the most heated arguments, they always came back. But this time, I had taken the table away. The next morning, Sarah Jenkins placed a new stack of documents on my desk. The bank's risk review was officially underway. Credit lines were tightened, withdrawals were restricted, and several strongly worded notices demanded additional collateral. The distributors followed suit, pausing scheduled payments and scrutinizing every minor clause in their contracts. She didn't use dramatic language, just stated the facts. There are parties refusing to roll over Vance Corp's short-term commercial papers, and interest rates are being driven up. 2 of their suppliers are now demanding upfront payments. "One more thing," Sarah paused. "The partner on their new district land development is demanding they post an additional security deposit, or construction will be halted." I flipped through the documents, the rustle of paper sharp in the quiet office. This chain reaction wasn't sudden. The risks had always been there, but someone had been holding the door shut. Once I let go, the storm rushed in. Mark stood nearby, his voice low. "Mr. Vance called you last night, but you didn't answer. He's tried a few more times today." I pushed my phone further away. "I'll deal with him later." At 10, Peterson knocked and entered, his expression grim. "Sir, Vance Corp has sent a legal letter. They're demanding we resume funding for the joint project, citing malicious termination of cooperation causing damages." I took the letter and glanced at it. The language was aggressive, but the argument was weak. What the Vances needed right now was cash, not a legal victory. "Draft a response," I said, placing the letter back on the desk. "Cite the risk-triggering clauses from the contract and demand they complete a new credit and audit review first." Peterson nodded. "Also, someone inside Vance Corp is trying to find out what our next move is. They might be preparing to leak information to the press." "Let them," I said. "We're not responding." I conducted the day's meetings as scheduled. A 1-hour acquisition review, a project risk control meeting, and a supply chain integration session. Everyone was moving forward in their own lane. Only the Vance Corporation felt like it had been unplugged, its lights going out one by one. At 3 in the afternoon, Mr. Vance called again. I answered. His voice was much quieter than before, as if he had aged several years overnight. "Ethan, give me 10 minutes. I watched the traffic flow outside my window." "Go on." He skipped the pleasantries. "The bank has tightened the screws. Our projects are stalled. Suppliers want payment up front, and several partners are pulling out." "I know," I said flatly. He gritted his teeth. "What do you want? Name a price, or name your terms." "Isabella is young. She made a mistake. I'll have her apologize to you." I was silent for 2 seconds. "Mr. Vance, an apology won't fix this." He paused. "Are you trying to destroy my family's company?" "I'm just taking back what belongs to my family." His breathing became ragged. "You already canceled the engagement. Isn't that enough?" I didn't answer. He suppressed his anger and fear, finally forcing out the words. "I'll bring her to see you tonight." I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. After hanging up, I had Mark cancel all my evening engagements. "I'll be at home," I said. Mark paused, then nodded. Should I arrange for security? Do it, I paused. But let's not make it a scene. Night fell quickly. I was home, but the living room lights were dim, with only a couple of wall sconces lit. The warm light spilled onto the carpet, making the room feel as quiet as an unoccupied model home. On the coffee table were two files. One was a list of all joint projects with Vance Corp. The other was a timeline of the credit guarantee withdrawal. I had no intention of using these to pressure anyone. I just wanted her to see exactly which support beam she had kicked out from under herself. The doorbell rang at 7:30. I didn't have the housekeeper get it. I went myself. When I opened the door, Isabella was standing there. She looked nothing like the woman I'd seen in my office. No heels, no diseño. She was wearing a simple gray pantsuit, her shoes dusty, as if she'd been running around all day. Her hair was messy, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Her father stood beside her, looking exhausted, his shoulders slumped. Leo Martinez was there, too. He stood further back, deliberately distanced from them. His suit was still sharp, but his eyes had lost their easy confidence. He was clutching his phone, his knuckles white. I stepped aside to let them in. There was no small talk in the living room. Mr. Vance spoke first, his voice hoarse. "Ethan, let's talk." I gestured for them to sit. Isabella started to sit, then stood up again, unable to stay still. Her eyes swept the room, finally landing on my face. "Do you really have to do this?" Her voice was raw. "You're pulling out too hard, too fast." I ignored her emotional plea and asked a simple question. "How much cash does your company have on hand right now?" Mr. Vance's expression changed. Isabella froze, her lips parted, but no words came out. Mr. Vance pressed his fingers to his temple. "Ethan, don't push her." I looked at him. "I'm not pushing her." My voice was calm. "She walked this path herself." My words stung Isabella. Her eyes instantly turned red. "I just went bungee jumping." She hissed, trying to keep her voice from breaking. "And for that, you're going to destroy my family." I looked at her. "You knew the engagement party was the next day," I said. "You knew what that event meant." She clenched her jaw, her shoulders trembling. "I thought you would understand," she said suddenly, her voice dropping. "I thought you'd be the same as always." Her words hung in the silence. Mr. Vance's face fell completely. He finally understood. The problem wasn't the bungee jumping or even the party. It was that she had always treated me as a default, a given. Leo, standing in the corner, cleared his throat, trying to interject. "Mr. Hayes, if the Vance projects are halted, the losses will be substantial. The best approach now is..." Isabella whirled around, her glare like a knife. "Don't you say a word." Leo froze, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He swallowed his words. I watched the scene unfold without a sound. She couldn't even control her own situation, yet her first instinct was to lash out at her assistant. Mr. Vance spoke in a low, firm voice. "Isabella, stop it." He turned to me. "Ethan, I won't beat around the bush. Name your price. As long as it's not outrageous, we can meet it. As for you two, we can stay out of it. You can reschedule the engagement, save face, and we can get the partnership back on track." I looked at him and didn't nod. "Mr. Vance, an engagement is not a bargaining chip." Isabella's tears finally fell. She wiped them away angrily, as if forbidding herself to cry, but they kept coming, smearing her makeup. She suddenly took a step forward. "Is this what you wanted? To see me beg?" She stared at me, her voice trembling. "What do you want me to say? That I was wrong? That I can't live without you?" I held her gaze. "What I want to hear is something you can't say." She froze. The next second, as if her strength had vanished, her knees buckled, and she fell to the carpet. The sound was a dull thud, but in the quiet room, it was deafening. Mr. Vance's face went white. He shot to his feet. "Isabella." He reached for her, but she pushed his hand away. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with panic, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Ethan, I was wrong. You've always been the one I love," she said, the words rushing out as if she were running out of time. "There's nothing between me and Leo. I just wanted to provoke you, to see if you still cared about me." In the corner, Leo's face became a mask of ugly disbelief, as if he'd been publicly stripped bare. Isabella didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "I'll do anything you ask," she gasped. "Just don't do this to my family. Please." Her hand gripped the edge of the carpet, her knuckles white. I watched her kneeling there, and a memory flashed in my mind. 3 years ago, late at night, during the most difficult phase of building her company, we were crammed into a small conference room. She had held me and said that as long as we worked together, there was nothing we couldn't overcome. Her eyes had been full of light then, sharp and clean. Now, she was kneeling in my living room, her words nothing but a transaction. I felt no pain in my chest, only a powerful wave of revulsion. Mr. Vance stood there, his face ashen, his lips trembling, unable to speak. He probably never imagined his daughter would kneel so easily. I looked at Isabella and spoke a single word. Disgusting. She froze completely. The tears stuck on her face, her lips slightly parted. I continued, my voice low but every word clear. Get out. The color drained from Isabella's face, leaving it bloodless. Mr. Vance drew a sharp breath, and for the first time, real fear appeared in his eyes. Leo stood in the corner, wanting to move, but not daring to, like he was afraid he'd become the next target. I said nothing more. I walked to the front door and opened it. A cold wind swept in, the light from the living room spilling into the darkness outside. Mr. Vance, his jaw clenched, finally bent down to help Isabella up. Her legs were still shaking. She almost collapsed as he pulled her to her feet. She looked up at me, her lips moving as if to say something more, but the words were caught in her throat. I didn't wait. I just watched them leave. The footsteps outside were chaotic, like a frantic retreat. Leo was the last to go. As he passed me, his eyes met mine. They were filled with anger and panic. I didn't look away. The moment the door closed, the living room was silent again. The wall sconces were still glowing. The carpet was wrinkled where she had knelt. I stood there for a moment, then picked up the files from the coffee table and closed them. The edges of the paper were perfectly neat, as if nothing had ever happened. 05 Isabella kneeling before me that night changed nothing. The next morning, Vance Corp's situation worsened. Sarah Jenkins placed the latest financial data on my desk. 2 of Vance's primary suppliers have halted shipments, citing extended payment cycles. Also, one of their short-term loans is being partially called and ahead of schedule. I glanced at the figures. The capital chain was tightening, with links snapping one by one. Mark added, Mr. Vance is reaching out to other investment firms, but at this point, no one is willing to touch it. I nodded. Keep monitoring. At 10:30, just as I finished an internal meeting, the front desk called. Mr. Hayes, a Mr. Martinez is here to see you. He says he's from Vance Corporation. I paused for a second. Send him up. A few minutes later, Leo Martinez walked into my office. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket today, just a dress shirt with the cuffs rolled up and the top button undone. He looked more hurried than usual. He stood before my desk, not taking a seat. Mr. Hayes. I gestured for him to sit. Speak. He glanced at the door, making sure it was closed, before leaning in. I'm here to propose a deal. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. And you have something to offer? He took a deep breath. Vance Corp's internal financial problems are much more severe than they appear. He pulled several photocopied documents from his briefcase and placed them on the desk. They were detailed pages from Vance Corp's internal financial reports, clearly annotated. The expansion last year was too aggressive. The return on investment for several ventures was grossly overestimated. And one of their real estate projects is running significantly over budget. I flipped through a couple of pages. The data was real. What do you hope to achieve by showing me this? I asked. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Isabella is emotional, and many of her decisions are impulsive. Mr. Vance enables her, so a lot of these risks were never properly addressed. If you're willing to resume the partnership, or at least delay the divestment, I can help you push for a share restructuring from the inside. I looked up at him. Push for it. He nodded. The shareholders are already divided. If you signal your interest in a capital injection, I can coordinate with several of the minority shareholders to shift control over to you. He paused. At that point, you wouldn't just be a partner. You would have direct control of Vance Corporation. I listened without reacting immediately. Leo's ambition was even more naked than I'd anticipated. What do you want out of this? I asked. A corner of his mouth twitched. A position. What position? Executive director or CEO? His voice was clear, without a trace of hesitation. I looked at him. You have no feelings for Isabella? He was silent for 2 seconds, then spoke. Mr. Hayes, business is business. He said it without flinching. I finally understood. He was never on her side. He was on the side of power. You were in my house yesterday. You heard what she said. I stated. Leo's expression flickered. Isabella had, in front of him, declared her love for me and called him a tool for making me jealous. For an ambitious man, that was a public evisceration. Words spoken in an emotional state don't represent one's true position, he said coolly. Is that so? I leaned back in my chair. And is your position right now a true one? He didn't deny it. Vance Corp needs a rational decision-maker. And you believe that's you? I'm more suited for it than she is, at least. A small laugh escaped me. You're moving too fast. He frowned. Mr. Hayes, this isn't the time for sentiment. Vance Corp won't last much longer, and I'm sure you don't want to see its assets sold for parts. I looked at him and asked a different question. When did you start preparing this file? He flinched. I was just responsible for compiling reports. For how long? He didn't answer. The answer was obvious. Not yesterday, not today. For a long time, he had been noting every vulnerability, every mistake. I closed the file and pushed it back toward him. Do you really think I would hire someone who backstabs their own boss? Leo's face darkened. I'm not backstabbing. I'm mitigating damage. Whose damage? He didn't answer. Silence fell in the office. After a few seconds, he slowly stood up. Mr. Hayes, this opportunity only comes once. Does it? I looked at him. Then go back and wait. He stared at me for a few seconds, trying to read my intentions. Wait for what? For my call. He seemed to want to say more, but in the end, he collected his documents and left. After the door closed, Mark came in. Should we follow up on him? Keep an eye on him, I said. But be discreet. That afternoon, I had the investment department leak a rumor. Hayes Corp was evaluating a potential full acquisition of Vance Corp. It wasn't a formal announcement, just enough for the market to know we were looking. Not long after the news broke, Mark came in with an update. The Vance Corp shareholders have called a meeting. Leo Martinez was seen meeting with several minority shareholders beforehand. I smirked. He works fast, Sarah Jenkins added. 2 of the shareholders have been asking if we're serious about a takeover. Tell them, I said, that everything is subject to a formal evaluation. In the evening, Vance Corp convened an emergency board meeting. I wasn't there, but the updates came in a steady stream. Mark stood before my desk, reporting each new development. The atmosphere in the meeting is tense. A shareholder proposed bringing in outside capital. Leo Martinez is suggesting they proactively engage with Hayes Corp to gain some leverage. I looked up. What's Isabella's position? Mark paused. She's against it. I nodded. She wasn't stupid. She knew that letting me in would mean a shift in control. But she no longer had the final say. A few minutes later, Mark's phone rang. He answered, and his expression changed. At the board meeting, someone directly challenged Isabella's strategic failures. Leo Martinez presented a risk report on the spot, pointing out major hidden risks in several of last year's expansion projects. I smiled faintly. Did she see the report? She saw it. Her reaction? Mark lowered his voice. She lost control. I could picture it. The conference room's harsh lighting, the table covered in documents. She sits at the head, and the assistant she once trusted stands up, flipping through data, deconstructing her decisions piece by piece. Every sentence a blade. What did she say? I asked. She demanded to know why he had prepared those materials in advance. He replied that it was part of his duties. I nodded slowly. Duties? A beautifully chosen word. A few minutes later, Mark got another update. The meeting has been adjourned. Isabella left early. Leo Martinez is now in a private discussion with several of the shareholders. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights were beginning to bloom. Power has a way of making people turn on each other. She thought he was her supporter. He had planned his exit strategy long ago. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. Silence for 2 seconds. Ethan Hayes. It was Isabella. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had just been crying or screaming. Was that you who leaked the rumor? Which one? The acquisition. I didn't deny it. Just market chatter. She let out a short, cold laugh. Leo just told the board that you were interested in buying a stake. He sounded very confident. I didn't speak. Her breathing became heavier. Did he come to you? I looked out the window. He did. Silence on the other end. What did he say? He wanted to make a deal. She drew a sharp breath. Did he give you internal company files? I didn't answer. My silence was the answer. A few seconds later, her voice dropped to a near whisper. I trusted him for 6 months, and he was the first one to turn on me. I could hear it in her voice. It wasn't just anger, but the profound shock of betrayal. You're only seeing him clearly now, I said. She laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Yeah. Too late. She said nothing more. I offered no words of comfort. This was a situation beyond comfort. After hanging up, I returned to my desk. It was clean, the files neatly arranged. Leo wanted to use me to climb the ladder. Isabella wanted to use me to save herself. But they had both forgotten. I'm not a tool to be used. Tomorrow's board meeting was going to be even more interesting. 06 the next morning, the Vance Corp board meeting reconvened. I wasn't there. The Hayes Corp investment team submitted a formal letter of intent for due diligence. Our position carefully neutral. No promises, no retreats. At noon, Mark came in. Vance Corp is officially fractured. 3 shareholders are in favor of bringing in outside capital. Isabella is still opposed, but she no longer has a majority vote. I nodded. And Leo? He's pushing the proposal, saying he can lead the negotiations with us. I smiled faintly. He's eager. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone vibrated. Isabella. I watched the screen, letting it ring until the last second before I answered. Her voice was calmer than last night. I want to see you. Where? The coffee shop downstairs from your office. I glanced at the time. 15 minutes. I hung up and stood. Mark followed me. Should I come with you, sir? No. The coffee shop was on the ground floor of the Hayes Tower, its large windows looking out onto the main street. It was quiet in the afternoon, with soft music playing. She was sitting in the farthest corner. No assistant, no father. She was wearing a simple white blouse and black pants. With almost no makeup, her hair tied back carelessly. Her face was pale and her eyes were swollen, but there were no tears. I walked over and sat down. She looked up at me, her expression complex. Thanks for coming. Get to the point, I said. She nodded, her hands clasped on the table, knuckles white. The board has agreed to bring in outside capital. The condition is that the current management team accepts a restructuring. I didn't interrupt. She continued. Leo proposed in the meeting that he be appointed as the executive lead to liaise with your team. As she said this, a corner of her mouth twisted in a self-mocking grimace. I've been asked to step back, temporarily. The air grew still. She stared at the tabletop. I used to think he was on my side. Now I see he's on the side of self-interest. I looked at her, offering no comment. She looked up at me. He talked to you, didn't he? He did. She nodded slowly. I can guess what he said. She was quiet for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, Are you really planning to acquire Vance Corp? It's under evaluation, I answered. If I agree to the restructuring, will you give my family's company a chance to survive? I looked at her. Whether Vance Corp survives depends on its asset value, not on you. Her eyes flickered. So, this isn't about getting revenge on me? No. She seemed to let out a breath of relief, yet she also looked more lost. Then what about us? She trailed off. I didn't fill the silence. She bit her lip, then finally asked the question. Is there really no chance for us at all? Her voice was quiet but direct. No threats, no emotion, just a simple question. I looked at her. The moment you decided to take him bungee jumping, it was over. She froze. Just because of that. Not because of the bungee jumping, I said. Because you treated me as someone who would just accept it by default. She was silent. I went on. You never considered that I have my own limits. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. I thought you wouldn't leave. Her voice was barely a whisper. For 3 years, you were always right behind me. That was my choice, I said. Not your entitlement. She looked up, her eyes red again, but she held back the tears. I didn't do it on purpose. I just got used to it. Used to you solving my problems, used to you being there when things got tough. I didn't speak. She finally said the honest thing. I used you as a safety net. As the words fell, she looked as if her last ounce of strength had been drained. She didn't make any more excuses. No claims of misunderstanding or impulsiveness. She just sat there, like a person who had suddenly woken up. I took him that day because I wanted to see if you would try to stop me, she said with a bitter smile. I wanted to confirm if you still cared about me the way you used to. And in return, you cut off every escape route I had. I looked at her. You want to test me? I wanted confirmation. I gave your answer. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. You did. We sat in silence for a long time. The coffee grew cold. Outside, the traffic flowed endlessly. She finally spoke. If the acquisition happens, I'll sign the papers. On one condition. What? Don't tear my family's company apart completely. I looked at her. You're still thinking about your family's legacy. She nodded. It was my father's life's work. Not yours. She paused. It used to be mine, but not anymore. She said it without anger, only a stark clarity. I stood up. Your signature is a business decision. It has nothing to do with me. She looked up at me. Then what about our 3 years? I stopped. That's in the past. The light in her eyes slowly dimmed. I understand. She didn't try to stop me, and she didn't mention love again. She just sat there, watching me. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. That evening, Mark reported to me. Isabella Vance announced at the board meeting that she would cooperate with the restructuring. Leo Martinez's bid to take over executive power was questioned by several shareholders due to his lack of experience. I nodded, continued to observe. Late that night, I stood by the window in my study. The city lights spread out below. My phone lit up. A text message. I'm sorry. The sender, Isabella Vance. I glanced at it and didn't reply. Some things, once said, only make things more difficult for everyone. She finally understood that I was not her backup plan, and I was no longer the man willing to stand behind her no matter what. 07 the next morning, the Hayes Corp acquisitions team held a closed-door meeting at headquarters. The glass doors of the conference room were covered, barring entry. The table was a sea of due diligence reports, valuation models, and risk assessments. Even the water glasses were pushed to the edge for fear of wrinkling a document. Peterson sat to my left, Sarah across from me. The head of investments brought up a projection of Vance Corp's asset structure. 3 core assets, he said, pointing at the screen. The new district land parcel, the downtown commercial complex, and their 2 distribution networks. Sarah added, the liability side is ugly. Concentrated short-term debt, high interest pressure. Their supply chain payment terms have been shortened, and their collections can't keep up with expenditures. I flipped through the report without speaking. Peterson had highlighted the risk clauses in red: litigation risk, project stoppage risk, and management infighting. If we acquire them, we need to secure absolute control. Acquisition method? I asked. The investment head replied, 2 options. 1, we acquire Mr. Vance's shares and inject new capital to gain a controlling stake. 2, a public tender offer combined with an asset swap. The first option is faster. The second is cleaner, but more expensive. I nodded. We go with the first option. The longer this drags on, the more their assets will depreciate. Sarah looked at me. Vance Corp has requested to retain some of their existing management seats. They can, I said, but we decide who fills the key positions. Peterson reminded me. Isabella Vance has already agreed to cooperate, and her father is willing to talk. But the internal shareholders are deeply divided. Leo Martinez is rallying the minority shareholders and might push for more aggressive terms. I closed the report. He wants the throne. No one in the room smiled. They all knew the classic move. An underling stirs up chaos, then presents himself as the only one who can restore order. I raised my hand. Prepare for a formal acquisition meeting. We're going to Vance Corp this afternoon. Mark handed me a list. Their attendees: Mr. Vance, Isabella Vance, 3 core shareholders, their CFO, and Leo Martinez. I glanced at it. He's coming too. Yes, sir. He said he's in charge of liaising. I placed the list back on the table. He could be in charge of taking notes. At 2 in the afternoon, our convoy pulled up to the Vance Corp headquarters. Their building was a few floors shorter than ours, the facade a bit dated, but it was in a prime location. The atmosphere in the lobby was tense. The receptionist spoke in a hushed tone, and employees hurried past with files, as if afraid of being stopped. The conference room was on the 26th floor. The moment the doors opened, I saw Isabella sitting across the table. She was in a dark suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were steadier than they had been. Her father sat beside her, drumming his fingers on the table in a nervous rhythm. On the other side were the 3 shareholders, all older men with calculating looks on their faces. Leo Martinez sat further back, his laptop open, a notepad arranged neatly, as if he were truly just an assistant. But when he looked at me, his gaze was too intense. My team and I took our seats. Peterson placed folders on the table, and Sarah distributed the offer sheets. There were no pleasantries. I spoke first. Hayes Corp is proposing a controlling acquisition, a cash injection plus a share purchase. Upon completion, Vance Corp will become a majority-owned subsidiary of Hayes Corporation. Mr. Vance's throat worked. The price. Sarah pushed a valuation summary toward him. Based on asset assessment and debt structure, this is our offer range. The conditions are as follows. All existing short-term debt is to be handled by Vance Corporation. Hayes will only assume operational liabilities post-acquisition. One of the shareholders immediately frowned. Those terms are too harsh. I looked at him. You're free to find other investors. He fell silent. Right now, Vance Corp had plenty of problems, but a shortage of cash. Another shareholder cleared his throat. Mr. Hayes, we're willing to negotiate, but the management structure needs to be clear. Isabella is, after all, a key figure. All eyes turned to Isabella. She didn't flinch. She met my gaze. I said, post-acquisition, the board will be restructured. Mr. Vance will retain a title as honorary director. Isabella, I paused. Her fingers tightened slightly. Can retain a board seat, but she will no longer serve as CEO. A collective sharp intake of breath filled the room. Mr. Vance's face darkened. Ethan, Isabella raised a hand, stopping him. She looked at me. I accept. She said it evenly, as if reciting a foregone conclusion. The shareholders exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. The soft tapping of Leo's keyboard from the back of the room was a quiet, irritating noise. He suddenly spoke up. Mr. Hayes, if Isabella is no longer CEO, the management team will need someone who can take over immediately. I looked up at him. Peterson cut him off first. Mr. Martinez, speaking privileges at this meeting are limited to shareholders and authorized representatives of both parties. Leo froze, his face flushing. He forced a smile. I was merely offering a suggestion. I took over. Your suggestion is not needed. The air turned colder. He retracted his hands from the keyboard, his posture stiff, as if he'd just been slapped. Sensing the shift, a shareholder cautiously asked, Mr. Hayes, then who will serve as CEO? I looked at Sarah. Hayes Corp will install a professional manager. In the interim, our investment and finance departments will co-supervise operations. A formal appointment will be made in 3 months. Mr. Vance's voice was low and strained. You're planning to gut the company. I looked at him. Mr. Vance, this is an acquisition, not a loan. He said nothing more. The negotiation moved to the details. Asset lists were confirmed line by line, liabilities were assigned, and plans for employee retention, supply chain contracts, and project resumptions were all detailed in the appendices. The shareholders cared most about the money. Mr. Vance cared most about saving face. Isabella cared most about speed. She knew that any delay would only make things worse. Leo sat in the back, silent, but the resentment was written all over his face. We took a 10-minute recess. I went to the end of the hall to take a call. Peterson followed. Martinez just cornered one of the shareholders in the break room, Peterson said in a low voice. He told him he has a way to get Hayes Corp to give him a position. He's trying to use the shareholders to pressure you. I nodded. Let him. Peterson looked surprised. You're not going to stop him? I can't, I said. The more you try to shut down a person like that, the more you give them a stage. The recess ended, and we returned to the room. As expected, Leo sat up straighter, as if preparing for another charge. When we reached the management clause, one of the shareholders spoke up. Mr. Hayes, we believe Leo Martinez could serve as an effective transitional leader. He's familiar with the business and can help stabilize the internal teams. Leo immediately jumped in. I'm prepared to take on the responsibility and help the company through a smooth. I held up a hand, cutting him off. Leo Martinez will not be a part of the new management. The room was silent for a beat. The shareholder frowned. Why not? He's very capable. I turned my gaze to Leo. You want to hear the reason? Leo's jaw was tight. Please, Mr. Hayes. My voice was flat. Because you're disloyal. The color drained from his face. I am loyal to the company's interests, he argued, his voice strained. Everything I've done has been for the good of Vance Corp. Isabella suddenly let out a short, sharp laugh. Leo whipped his head around to look at her. She wasn't laughing anymore. She just said coolly, "You know exactly who you're loyal to." Her words were like nails hammered into his chest. He wanted to fight back, but didn't dare lash out at her. He could only turn his angry gaze back to me. I didn't engage him further. Hayes Corp has no use for people like that, I said, addressing the shareholders. If you insist on writing him into the agreement, then this acquisition offer is withdrawn, effective immediately. No one spoke. The shareholders looked at each other and ultimately chose silence. They wanted cash, not to champion an ambitious assistant. Mr. Vance looked grim, but didn't protest. Isabella sat perfectly still the entire time, as if forcing herself to suppress every emotion. Finally, the terms were agreed upon. Peterson pushed the official contract in front of me. I picked up the pen. The only sound in the room was the soft scratch of the nib on paper. I signed and passed it to Mr. Vance. He held the pen, his fingers trembling. He hesitated for a few seconds before adding his signature. Last was Isabella. She took the pen, looked down, and signed quickly, without pausing. When she was done, she placed the pen back on the table and looked up at me. Her eyes were clear. There was no pleading, no resentment, just the kind of calm that comes from being forced to grow up. Leo Martinez sat in the back, his face ashen, his hands clenched into fists. The meeting concluded, and the documents were exchanged. I stood and adjusted my cuffs. Leo suddenly appeared in front of me, his voice a low hiss. "Mr. Hayes, you'll regret not using me." I looked at him. "You're free to find someone who will." He started to say something else, but Peterson was already stepping between us. "Mr. Martinez, please step aside." 3 days after the acquisition agreement was signed, Vance Corp made the official announcement. Hayes Corp takes controlling interest. Management restructured. The market's reaction was swift. Capital began to flow back, suppliers re-engaged, and the banks reassessed their credit lines. Everything moved forward according to plan, without any dramatic flair. I didn't go to Vance Corp to oversee things personally. Our investment and finance teams were dispatched to take inventory of assets, reorganize projects, and audit the books. Every line item was scrutinized, without sentiment. Mark sent daily progress reports to my inbox. New district development has met conditions to resume. Downtown commercial complex leases being renegotiated. Short-term debt extensions secured. My only reply was ever 2 words. Proceed. Leo Martinez's name soon vanished from the company directory. The reason was simple: breach of professional conduct. His attempts to collude with shareholders to influence the acquisition were well documented. The HR department handed him his termination notice. There was no argument, no scene. He left quietly. I heard he'd reached out to a few venture capital firms, hoping to start something new. I also heard he was planning to leave the city. None of it concerned me. Isabella moved out of the villa we had once chosen together. It was supposed to have been our marital home. Her father had someone call and ask if she could have an extension. I had Mark deliver the reply. The contract stands. A few days later, I was driving past the neighborhood. A moving truck was parked outside the main gate. She was standing on the lawn in a simple trench coat, directing the movers. "No drama, no tears." She saw my car and looked over from a distance. I didn't stop. The windows were tinted. She probably couldn't see me clearly, but I could see her. Her posture was perfectly straight, as if she were holding on to her last shred of dignity. As the car left the community, I realized our relationship had been completely packed away, loaded into boxes along with the furniture. A week later, Hayes Corp held a launch event for a new project. It was the first development on the integrated Vance land, now spearheaded by us. The event hall was bright, filled with media and partners. I stood on the stage, the new brand logo behind me. In the front row, Mr. Vance sat in a corner seat. He didn't speak, just listened quietly. Isabella sat further back, not in a place of honor. She was wearing a professional suit, her expression composed, like any other board member. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't mention the past. I talked about plans, strategy, and capital allocation, project timelines, profit forecasts, and risk management. Every number was precise. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. I stepped off the stage and shook hands with several partners. In my peripheral vision, I saw Isabella standing where she was, not moving forward. After the event, as the crowd thinned, she walked over. "Congratulations," she said, her voice even. I nodded. "The foundation of this project was laid by your father," she said. "You've handled it well." "A project is an asset, not an emotion," I replied. A small smile touched her lips. "Right." She paused for a moment. "Leo Martinez is gone." "I know. He came to see me. Said he regretted backing the wrong horse." Her voice was detached. "Too late for that." I didn't comment. She looked at me, her gaze calmer than it was in the coffee shop. "I've been reviewing the company's early files recently," she said. "At so many critical moments, you were the one who negotiated the deals. I never paid close enough attention before. I see it clearly now." I didn't reply. She didn't seem to expect one. "Ethan," she said my name. "If, back then, I hadn't gone on that bungee trip." She didn't finish the sentence. I looked at her. "You would have found another way to test me." She was silent for 2 seconds, then nodded. "I would have." She didn't say she was sorry again, and she didn't say she loved me. She just extended her hand. "I'll see you at the board meetings." I shook it briefly. Strictly business. She withdrew her hand and turned away. She walked slowly, but she didn't look back. I stood there, watching the event staff begin to dismantle the backdrop. The scene was similar to the day of the engagement party, except this time, it wasn't our names on the sign. It was the name of a new project. Back in my office that night, Mark handed me a file. The post-integration shareholding structure for Vance. I glanced at it. Hayes Corp held the controlling majority. Mr. Vance retained a minority stake. Isabella's share had been diluted, but she remained a core shareholder. She hadn't been pushed out, just moved from the center to the periphery. I signed off on it. The night outside was dark. My phone lit up. A text message. "Thank you for not dismantling my family's legacy." The sender, Isabella Vance. I looked at it for a few seconds and didn't reply. The words "thank you" didn't fit between us. I turned the screen off. I stood and walked to the window. The city lights glowed below like countless new paths. I suddenly understood that what had truly angered me was never about who she went bungee jumping with. It was that I had invested so much in her that I had started to lose sight of myself. I thought love could tolerate anything. I learned that boundaries are more important than feelings. There was a knock on the door. "Sir, it's time for the meeting." "Right." I picked up my file and walked out of the office. The conference room was bright, the team already assembled. New projects, new strategies, new goals. I sat down and opened the folder to the first page. The door closed softly behind me. This time, there was no one standing behind me, and I didn't need them to be.